When my neighbor Mrs. Thompson asked me to help her with some gardening, I thought, how hard could it be? I wasn't exactly a gardening expert, but she said she'd pay me in homemade cookies, and I'm weak when it comes to cookies. She handed me a pair of gloves, pointed to her shed, and said, "Grab the hoe and work on the bed." "The bed," I repeated. "Yes, the bed," she said, walking off to trim her roses. So I headed to the bedroom. After 5 minutes of flipping the mattress, fluffing pillows, and smoothing out the sheets, Mrs. Thompson came back inside and found me mid-pillow fluff. Her eyes widened, and she clutched her chest like she was about to faint. "What on earth are you doing? Making the bed, like you said." "I meant the garden bed. Outside." Oh, my face turned redder than her prized tomatoes. That makes way more sense. Back to the shed I went, where I stared at an array of tools that looked like medieval torture devices. She said hoe, but I wasn't sure which one that was. After some deliberation, I grabbed a rake and headed to the garden bed. Mrs. Thompson spotted me immediately. "Why do you have a rake?" I said hoe. "Isn't this a hoe?" She shook her head. "No, that's a rake. The hoe is the flat one with the sharp edge." I sighed and swapped tools. Finally, I started loosening the soil in the garden bed, or at least I thought I was. Mrs. Thompson rushed over again, flailing her arms. "No, no, no. You're supposed to hoe the weeds out of the soil. You're just digging a trench." At this point, I was sweating and regretting every cookie I'd ever eaten, but I wasn't about to quit. "Fine," I grumbled and started hacking away at the weeds. That's when Mrs. Thompson yelled from across the yard, "Watch out for the thorns." "Thorns?" I echoed, looking around. "Yes, the rose thorns. Don't let them prick you." Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to hoe weeds while also dodging thorny rose bushes, but it's like playing Twister with gardening tools. I managed to avoid most of them until I slipped and landed squarely in the bush. "Are you okay?" Mrs. Thompson asked, trying not to laugh. "Just peachy," I muttered, pulling thorns out of my arm. After that fiasco, she handed me a watering can and said, "Water the plants and don't forget the succulents. They're thirsty." I looked around the garden, puzzled. "Which ones are the succulents?" She rolled her eyes. "The ones that look like tiny cabbages." Great. Now I was watering decorative cabbages. Finally, Mrs. Thompson asked me to deadhead the daisies. At this point, I didn't even ask for clarification. I just grabbed the shears and went to work trimming the tops off every daisy in sight. When she came back and saw what I'd done, her jaw dropped. "Why did you decapitate my flowers? You said to deadhead them." Deadheading means removing the wilted flowers, not all the flowers. By the time I finished, the garden was half weeded, the daisies were bald, and I looked like I'd been in a fight with a porcupine. But Mrs. Thompson handed me a plate of cookies anyway and said, "Well, you tried your best. Maybe next time, we'll stick to something simpler, like washing windows."